Share. Okay, it's being recorded. All right, great. So my topic is study guides, how elite Chinese students prepare for global competition. Um, let me share a story first. I would like you guys to meet Ashley Fung. Ashley is a math major who just graduated from Cambridge about 2 years ago. She received multiple offers before graduation in the industry and as well as grad school. So two were particularly interesting to her. One, on the work track, she could move to Switzerland and she would take on a job at actually a pretty good job at one of the largest corporation in the world over there. Another is if she wanted to go to grad school, she was accepted to the best business school in Europe and she would be moving to France. Either way, regardless of what she chose, her expected initial salary would be about at least, actually much higher than 100,000 euros as initial starting salary. So Ashley, after some debate and some decisions, she decided to take on the first track. She wanted to go working in Switzerland directly after graduation. A year after her work, she felt tired of the little town that she was living in Europe. And so she decided to go job hunting again. She hopped to a job in a Japanese investment bank in Singapore and is working as a sales in that investment bank. After the job hop, her earning, actually her income was much higher than what she initially had, which was 100,000 euros. And she was also paying much less taxes than she was in Switzerland. And then as a foreign worker, she enjoys a lot more benefits than her Japanese colleagues. So Ashley is currently 24 years old. When I asked her, I think late last year, I asked her what she wanted to do in the future. She wasn't really exactly sure, as people of 24, yeah, they're not entirely sure. She told me, and I quote, I could stay in the same company and move up the ladder, or I could job hop for higher income somewhere else. Also, I could get a master's degree. Being from academia, I was, more interested in the master's degree part. So I asked her where she might consider going afterwards if she wanted to do the master's thing. She told me, well, an MBA in the US, such as Harvard or Stanford, are both possible. Ashley over here is one of the students who came from China, and she is competitive at school and at work. She is globally oriented, and she is one of the army of Chinese elites who are on their way to becoming a part of the global elite that is currently forming. The reason I look at China and China's new elites is particularly interesting is because China is a rising power. As late as 2020 and also in 2019, there's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of interest in China and how the country is doing. So before the pandemic, before the trade war, and actually during the trade war, media around the world was discussing the rise of China in technology, in trade, in electric cars, in dominating space, dominating AIs, and other industries. They're also really interested in China's global investment, such as CNN has this interactive map that maps out China's global investment since at least 2014. It also looks at the number of billionaires in the world and shows China is leading the pack. China creates 2 billionaires per week. It also says, actually, I didn't say that, but there was some frenzy in about how many billionaires under age 40 that is made by China in a sense. And so that is part of it. Also, because of these issues or the speculations, the rise of China has come to people's minds, and we are now looking at how China might create a new world order. Of course, some people say it wouldn't. For example, the Forbes or the opinion pieces, a lot of people speculate that they won't be able to. But overall, there's surprising interest and surprising positive speculation or positive prediction that China is going or is on the way of becoming a global power that will dominate the world in some form. And so with all of that, in 2019, the European Commission report actually just came out earlier this year. It clearly sees China as a rising superpower. It says China can no longer be regarded as a developing country. It is a key global actor and leading technological power. Simultaneously, Goldman Sachs predicts that in the 21st century, China will be the first non-Western country that rules the world. So this perspective is so prevalent that our question has turned something from like, will China dominate the 21st century to when China rules the world? And to understand China's rise to power, how it is behaving as a global actor, we really cannot just look at policy or trade or economics or basically Xi Jinping. That is one person, he's very powerful, but we can't just look at those. They're important, but we really cannot simply rely on popular belief or, Goldman Sachs prediction. Instead, to really look at what is going on, we need to understand the people in China, especially the Chinese group, a group of Chinese who are competing with others in the global arena. We must understand how people like, for example, Ashley Fang came about. This means that we need to look at how she and other people like her were trained, how they learned the ropes that made her and others like her who are so competitive and successful in most measures in global society. So the question, the heart of the question that I'm most interested in is, who are these people? Who are these new elites? And importantly, how do they become who they are? How do they come to be like this? What I mean by being this is how they are hyper competitive, they're globally oriented, and they're very successful even by strict Western standards. We already actually know something about the Chinese youth. As Chinese youth, most of all, we actually would also call them Chinese students. So Chinese students are very competitive, especially academically. International tests shows that Chinese students are top performing in math, science, which is, not very surprising, but actually recently we also found out that they rank top in international tests about creative problem solving. So these people are not just, STEM field or future engineers, they're also creative thinkers. They are people who can solve real problems at hand. Their disadvantaged students in China, actually, just on a side note, is also doing better than most of the similarly disadvantaged students in other countries, such as the US. And also the top students in China are as good as or are outperforming other very top students elsewhere too. And so these students, additionally, are going abroad at unprecedented numbers and unprecedented rates. Currently actually not currently, at least before the pandemic, before closed borders and decreased number of visas, about a third of international students in the US come from China. US is not alone in receiving so many high-performing Chinese students. Canada, Australia, Germany, the United Kingdom, they're all seeing similar patterns that the majority of their international students come from China. In the UK in particular, it was pretty interesting that I found out that the number of Chinese international students in Britain or in Great Britain are greater than the next 5 countries combined. So this is a lot of very competitive, academically oriented students who are pouring into Western countries. And Again, they're not just academically competitive, they are also very creative, they are critical thinkers. A lot of the international tests are showing that they're more than what we used to think that they are, such as engineers or, I don't know, future doctors, something like that. There's also something else that we know about these Chinese students. They all, as you know, after the after 1980s, after the one-child policy, these Chinese students are generations of singletons, meaning they are all the single child in their families. And so this means that one, they have become little emperors in a sense. They rely on their parents for everything, for resource, for money, for opportunities. Um, they flaunt their family's wealth, especially the elite ones, right? They are incredibly entitled. Okay, fair enough. Every elite is entitled in every country. But the Chinese students, because they are singletons, they are incredibly incredibly entitled, and their level of disrespect for the elders or for others in general is quite astonishing. Books such as Only Hope or Buy Me the Sky, you can basically see from their title that they take a little emperor's point of view when they portray the new generation of elites that we are seeing. And so even though they call it the little emperors, a more direct term that we sometimes hear but rarely use is that they are basically portrayed as a group of spoiled brats. That's basically the idea. However, there's also a third idea, which is because they're a generation of singletons, they are incredibly burdened. This is a generation of burdened youth that we are talking about. They, because their parents are probably oftentimes also a single child, they have 4 grandparents on top of 2 parents who are all supervising or looking over their shoulder and, you know, just trying to make sure that things are going well for this kid. So these kids shoulder 6 older generations' expectations. These older generation pour their resources to help them succeed, true, but when as they enjoy high levels of family support, the level of stress and anxiety is basically just as high. And so they're engaged in intense competition. They have incredibly high family expectations. All eyes are on them and the family, their educational outcome, their growth trajectory, their possible futures are all family projects. And when you have all of that on you, that creates a lot of stress. So these kids are shown to be psychologically stressed. Their suicide rates are not low at all. Actually, they're pretty high, depending on the age, especially in 12th grade when exam pressure is really high. They're stressed, they're anxious. They are a group of youth who have just a lot of need for help with their psychological counseling, or they need help to foster their well-being. The problem with all 3 perspectives is that, okay, so now we know they're spoiled, they're competitive, they're stressed out. How does that feed into the elite group who are competing at global levels? We can think about spoiled brats or stressed out adolescents or competitive kids on a very general basis. If we don't know them, we imagine them as a group, then yes, I can imagine them like that. But we're talking about future global elites here. It's very hard to see the future global elites or the representatives of a country or a country like China being completely spoiled, stressed out, hyper competitive, and being like that into adulthood. This is not a very clear picture. In fact, I would even claim it's kind of impossible to see the global elites like that. And so these perspectives are very useful. They show us a lot about who the Chinese, new generation of Chinese are, but they don't really shed that much light on the elite group of these Chinese. And we need to know about the elite groups because they are the people who might be controlling the country in the future, who will have a say in world society as China increases its global presence. And so I did a study to look at who these kids are, who are they, and what made them become who they are. I primarily did ethnography in 2 high schools. I intensely observed a lot of them. I went to class with them. I sat at the back. I went to I went through breaks with them. We held hands. Well, that sounds weird, but in that context, it was appropriate. So it was a year and a half of going to high school with them. It was not very easy. I also interviewed 28 elite students, their parents, and their teachers. So the total amount of interview was 85 before they went to college, and amounts to over 100 because I kept following them until last year before the pandemic. The students are elite because they are socioeconomic elites. There's a lot of definitions for elites. Those who are from exam countries or who are more familiar with examination systems, you would think elites as the top performers, but no, let's use something more global. And so I'm defining elites as the socioeconomic background. They have to come from top 10% family incomes in urban China because there's half of the Chinese population live in rural China, so top 10% family income in urban China can roughly be translated to top 5% in the entire nation. If you want to use other additional criteria, you can also use that. These kids are basically elite on every socioeconomic measure. Their parents basically all went to college. Only one kid has no parents with college degrees. College was very hard to obtain back in those days. Their parents went to college in the very late 1980s to early 1990s. That was when college admission rates were less than 2%. They're also all Beijingers, so because their household registration system, which is the hukou system, decides a person's social welfare, benefits, educational resources, where the kid could go to school. Being a Beijinger means a lot of benefits. They're also top performing if you really want. They were selected into 2 top performing high schools through exams, as well as guaranteed admission for demonstrating, superb talent, something like that. But the thing is that I would like to point out is that these kids are a different group of people from what we think about when we're thinking about elites in the world. These kids are all post-90s. They were mostly born in 1996 or so. They are very special. They're a special group because their parents obtained upward mobility to the elite status within China through educational success. These post-90s generation grew up in stable Chinese society. It was after the Chinese market reform. It was a time without serious revolution or social turmoil. And so they are the first generation to pursue elite status, not as upper mobility, but as a social reproduction. And importantly, because China, after the market reform, became more interconnected with the world and through economics, through politics, through media, and other ways, these kids are the first generation to have grown up in China as part of the world. And so when they talk about elite status, it's not just within the country. For them, naturally, it is part of a world global elite formation. So a little bit more details about my data, not to bore you guys. I started following these kids when they were in 2012. So these kids should be roughly 5 years older than you guys, something like that. They were in 11th and 12th grade when they were in 2012. They graduated between 2013 to 2014. They all went to top high schools in the 2 top high schools. 10 out of 28 that I interviewed were going to go abroad. Actually, all 10 were trying to go to the US. All of them were in Beijing at the time. All of them had top 10% family income in China. Let's fast forward to 2019. In 2019, all of them are young adults. They started working or they are in grad school. Out of 28, 3 stayed in China. The others, They're everywhere. Half of them actually are in New York City. There's one in Singapore, a few in London, Hong Kong, Paris, Tokyo. They're basically everywhere. And mostly their income about those who are working is top 10% by American standards, by Singapore standards, Hong Kong standards, and also by Chinese standards as well. And so they really, I wouldn't say hit the jackpot, but they really did do very well in life. It seems like they are very good players in a game called life. But then the question remains, how did they get to where they are? Who exactly are they? And so I argue in this book is that becoming elite in China or reproducing elite status is basically something that takes place in high school at least. It might be earlier, but at least by the time they're 11th to 12th grade, status is already, imprinted in somewhere deep down in their minds. Specifically, I think that they learn 3 things that help prepare them for global competition. First is you have to know the status system, its rules, its knickknacks, how do you navigate it? Second, after knowing the status system, you have to have status-based interactions. You need to know what you can do, what you cannot do, and what other people could do but you cannot, or what you can do but some other person cannot do. And third is that they always need to prepare for contingencies. Lightning will strike at some point. Everybody has some hurdles to overcome. It's very rare that someone will grow up with no problems or no setbacks at all. So they learn the importance of making viable backup plans and when to implement them. So these are the 3 main points that I would like you guys to know. Let's talk about the status system first. They need to know the status systems. Let's say that the status system in Chinese high schools, in the US, there's like jocks, there's probably burnouts, there's like nerds, there's the brains. In China, there's 4 types. There's the study gods. Study gods are the absolute top performers. They're like the quarterbacks, plus the cheerleaders, plus the brains, everything. They are the stars in the school. They're called the study gods because they don't study, but they're really top performing. And then there are the study holics, which you would call the nerds. Yes, actually, in China, at least the nerds have not top, but very high status as well. Why? Because they are top performing too. The difference between them and the study gods is that study holics study a lot. But it doesn't really matter because they get good grades, so they're still high status. And then moving on to the low status people. There's the underachievers who don't study and are low performing, and at the absolute bottom are the losers who studies a lot but are still low performing. And so you get a very clear structure system that the students have told me again and again. In fact, I didn't really know about the status systems until they kept talking to me about it for over half a year. And so in this status system, it's very clear that test scores determine status. High performers have very high status, period. Study gods, study holics all have high status because they are high performing. On the other hand, additionally, if within a high or low status group, demonstrated effort becomes important. Those with less effort will have higher status than those with a lot of demonstrated effort. But again, test scores remain the most important because let's look at underachievers. They don't really study, or they try to show that they're not studying, but they actually are low performing, and hence they are of low status. So this is a very clear status system that kind of penetrates through both schools and through basically that. But the status system is important not just because it's clear, but also that they understand that this status system is directly related to their future status. Mingjia, a girl from one of the schools, told me test scores are like money. When I asked her to tell me more about it, what exactly she meant, she said that test scores are like money. I'm not saying that rich people get more respect, but those who have money are a bit more respected than those without. This is exactly what they are doing in school. Those with test scores have a bit more respect than those who do not have the high test scores. It's not that test scores always generate respect, but it kind of functions like money, and the more you get, the more respect you have. And so they know the system in school means that they can attribute it to future status in society. Interestingly, also note that when they're looking at future status in society, the criterion they're using is money. Of course, status in society is not just about money. There's also other things. There's power, there's wealth, there's prestige, there's other fields that will generate high status in society. But for them, at least in high school, they have a very direct idea that yes, income, yes, money, and all of that turns into social economic status in society. And so to get top status and become elite in society, they know already by 12th grade what the value characteristics are, and they practice it through fighting for high test scores instead of anything else. Future in the society, they are prepared to fight for money and income and social economic status more than anything else. A second thing that they need to do is to have status-based behaviors. They need to navigate the hierarchy according to their status positions. And so interactions patterns definitely are based on status groups. Their interactions with peers are different, with teachers, with parents are also dependent on whether they have high status or high test scores. With peers, very simply, you could be admired or you could be mocked. It depends on your status group. You can do the exact same thing, but one generates admiration, the other generates mockery. A study god or a study holic could be really odd. They could be just simply weird. They could just not talk to other people and, be the oddball in the entire classroom, but they are still admired. People want to be like them. On the other hand, those who are not study gods and study holics, if they do the same thing, if they act oddly, if they're weird, they will be shunned by peers. They will be mocked or shamed in public. And similarly with the teachers, study gods and study holics can talk back to the teachers in the classroom. I have seen them swear in public during class at audible, like voices that you can hear from the back to the front of the classroom, but it's okay. They can vandalize, which is actually against the law, but they could still get out of jail free, something like that. They can be so-called very difficult students, but that's okay. Teachers will still pamper them. They're allowed to do whatever they want. On the other hand, you bet underachievers and losers will be reprimanded if they do anything, even slightly or remotely similar to what the aforementioned behaviors are. With parents is also a similar story. Study gods and study holics, they use their parents' credit cards to make online purchases without supervision. Their parents don't really care if they put on weight. It's really, weight gain is a non-issue. Underachievers and losers have a very different idea though. They cannot use their parents' credit cards. They even have their phone confiscated. In the case that their scores or test scores keep going down or don't go up at all, their weights could be a very serious issue. Their parents will call them fat in public, which I have seen. I have also seen multiple incidents of parents ordering the child to step back in the child's own graduation photo. To be basically, the parents want the kid to step back from their peers so the peers can slightly cover them so they don't look as fat. This created a lot of awkwardness in the group because, the star of, or the highlight of that picture is the graduate, and the graduate is now being ordered to step back from everybody else. And so that is a very different treatment than what the study gods and study holics experience. So in short, study gods can do anything. Study holics, not that much, but also, yeah, they can do pretty much whatever they want. They might be bad at something, but they'll still get the leadership opportunity. Losers, on the other hand, because they're at the absolute bottom, they are seen as to be can't doing anything. They might be nice, but it wouldn't matter because, you know, they're still going to be shunned and mocked for so-called quote unquote lesser brain power. So I see that Greta has a question about, would I say the bullying from students is more intense in China than it is in the US? I wouldn't say that. This is a good question. I didn't really firsthand observe bullying in the US, but I did read a lot about it and I hear a lot about it, and I've, you know, seen some incidences on TV. No, actually, bullying in China, at least in the elite schools, is toned down. It's more like shunning and shaming. Um, I think that the feeling of shame is not as intense as it is in the US, because as elite students, they don't really swear that much. So that one incidence of swearing is memorable, to say the least. But no, I don't think it's intense. But honestly, to be fair, bullying is bullying. It doesn't have to be intense or not. It's just bullying. It's, you know, if it's bullying, we call it out as bullying, and it just shouldn't happen. But unfortunately, it kind of does. And in China, the target of the bullying is always throughout a year and a half of every day into high schools, it was always the losers who were the targets of being bullied. Great, thanks for the question. So a next thing is that how they interact with peers, because interactions and your status in the school will carry real consequences. And so they come up with strategies for navigating the status quo. For example, a studyholic would sacrifice sleep to ace a test. And they will let let other peers know. It doesn't really matter for peers to know that they're sacrificing sleep, that their demonstrated hard work is, you know, up the roof high level. It doesn't really matter as long as they get very good scores. So they will definitely sacrifice sleep for tests. It is fine. Study gods, no way. If you want to sacrifice sleep for tests, stay home, don't let anybody know. Similarly, for an underachiever, they want to make sure that no one sees them studying. Jiaqi was a kid like that. He was one of the kids who stayed in school for very long hours. When other people were working, he was reading magazines. He was looking on, you know, discussing models and cars with other people. But when other people weren't looking, for example, in weekends or when no one else was around him, he would be studying like crazy. He would be nailed to his desk, except that none of his peers could know. Because why? Because he doesn't have good test scores. If he demonstrated some level of effort, he would immediately fall to the loser category and he would be the target of bullying instead of the bullier. And so that for them is a way to strategize them to keep themselves from falling down, if not to stay on top or even try to be on a higher status group. On the other hand, this is the similar thing that's happening when they were in college. In college, Alex was a guy who went to somewhere similar to Boston College. Alex was an underachiever in his Chinese group. He doesn't have good grades and he never talks about studying with other Chinese classmates or Chinese students in the Boston area. Actually, in the entire Chinese Student Association, he would be someone who always talks about video games or other extracurricular activities such as skiing. On the other hand, when he's with his Kenyan peers, I don't know why they're Kenyan, but he says that he has a lot of Kenyan friends and they're all lower performing than he is. He talks about homework all the time. He asks about them, he helps them, he works on them, he works together with them. So this is a similar strategy between a studyholic and underachiever, except that it depends on who his peers are. And Alex then strategizes accordingly to his status in each group. Also, for the study gods, they demand peer attention. That's something that they learn, that it's okay, that they're entitled. So yes, they are very entitled. Julie is one of the study gods. When I first met her, I wasn't really sure what to ask about. You know, I was early on. It was 10 years ago. I didn't really know her. I didn't really know what she was talking about when she said study god. So finally, when she realized that I had no idea what the status hierarchy was, she looked at me in the eye and told me, I'm quite famous, you know. What the heck, right? So, well, study gods demand their attention. On the other hand, an example of a loser is Sarah, who never really said that she was a loser, but her friends said that she was a loser. Sarah answered a question wrong in class, and the shaming incident immediately followed, with people being like, the heck? And the guy beside me immediately swearing. Can I swear in this class? Well, basically, it's a quote. It said, what the fuck? And so that was in front of the teacher, and Sarah becomes shamed. Her face was all red. She stood really still in the classroom until the class ended, and she walked out without talking to anyone, while the other students chatted and just talked about anything during the break. All right, so Jinsuk has a question that says, I'm saying that studying and underachieving is considered a lower ladder of the system than not studying and underachieving. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. Losers who study and don't have good grades are at the bottom of the ladder. They are considered to, quote, are very pathetic, quote, have problems with their brains, or quote, just stupid. This is something that the elites say. I don't necessarily agree, but it's fairly common in the schools that I've found. Maybe they were very direct in 12th grade. I'm not sure, but yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. It kind of goes against what most people would think. All right, so moving on. Later on, Sarah actually makes a turn. She has a success story in a sense. Sarah went to somewhere similar to George Washington University. There, she became a straight A student. However, even though she was a loser when she was in high school and now is a studyholic or study god, I don't know, in George Washington University, she starts making fun of other students, regardless of her own past experiences. When I visited her and her other friends at George Washington U, she told me that those students who just study all the time and just can't do anything else and still get B's or minuses are stupid. She doesn't know what they're doing, and she thinks that they're probably born inferior. So this is something that is interesting, I guess. I would say that. Oh, very interesting. Sarah herself as a loser has now become a high status kid and starts doing the exact same thing as she has been suffering from in China, except that now she's in the US. Sarah is currently still in the US, and so is Alex. They are both working in the East Coast. And so interaction with teachers also requires some strategy. Of course, it's not as strategic and as juicy stories as the peers are, but they know that they kind of show that teachers are important people. They know that teachers have a stake in the performance because in China there is performance pay. This is something that the government or the schools use to encourage teachers to be motivated to teach better, to spend more time with students, to help, to just do their best in helping students succeed by performance pay. And also, teachers in these two high schools in particular are oftentimes the exam givers for the national entrance exam in Beijing. In this sense, actually, very interestingly, students draw a direct parallel between their teachers and their future bosses. Tracy was a girl who went to Johns Hopkins University afterwards. In 2014, when I asked her, how's your relationship with your teachers? She said, oh, of course, my teachers like me. I'm such a good student. She was a studyholic. She has very good grades. In 2019, when I visited her during her break, she said, I asked her about her relationship with her boss. She said, of course my boss likes me. Interestingly, I bring in so much money. So this is a direct quote that she used without knowing that she was using almost the exact same words to describe two different relationships. In her mind, actually, the relationships go parallel. Teachers and bosses. Teachers have performance pay. So do bosses. As a trader in Hong Kong, her boss gets a cut by everything she brings into the company. The teachers are the exam givers, and so she needs to kind of, suck up in a sense to the teachers, but also the bosses are the people who give them the different cases. And if you want the more lucrative cases, the one that generates more money, you have to be on good terms with your boss. So in this sense, they learn to interact with teachers and then use what they learn to interact in the future with their bosses as soon as they step into the job setting. Thirdly, they also interact with parents in a different pattern. They know that parents will do anything for them, for their performance too. Parents already have adjusted work schedules in the 12th grade, especially a lot of the mothers drop out from the labor force to take care of the 12th grader, not the baby, the 12th grader. They also change living arrangements. For example, dads who don't really quote unquote do anything for them need to move out of the house so that the grandparents who can take better care of the child can move in and help the mother take care of the child. Note that the dad really isn't doing anything to harm or hurt the kid's chances of going to a good college, but because the dads usually are not very helpful, they move out to make way for other people who can bring a so-called beneficial influence. Also, the parents give conscious indulgence. For example, they often reject their child's pleas. For example, Yulong wanted to get a puppy. She always wanted a puppy. She's been pleading with her mother for as long as she can remember to have a puppy. Well, she eventually did get her puppy. When did she get it? In 12th grade, when she failed a very important test and was having almost an important emotional breakdown. To prevent her from breaking down emotionally, her mother immediately agreed to her having a puppy. Also, conscious indulgence takes the form of, for example, extravagant celebrations. Alex, who we just met somewhat, went on 3 ski trips in 2 months after the admission deadline. He didn't really know where he was going yet, but they were ready to celebrate, and it's like a form of, conscious indulgence. And so to explain this, Julie, as a study god, kind of capitalizes on her mother's conscious indulgence. Julie was one of the girls who could use her mother's credit card for everything, even when the mother did not want to give her her credit card. So in one time when Julie wanted to purchase something that was 6 times the rate of an average price, her mom refused to give her the credit card to make that online purchase. Furiously, Julie yelled at her mom, threw the door at her mom's face, and later on called me and complained. I'm sure she complained to everybody about how quote unquote annoying her mom was to her. In 2019, when I visited, Julie was still a study god. She went to somewhere similar to Bryn Mawr College. And then by 2019, she graduated and was on her way to being a master's student in Columbia. I asked how she was doing. She told me that she had just gotten out of an argument with her mom, and I was like, wow, again, really, on any day that I visit you? Okay, I guess. She told me about her mom was super, again, annoying, and this time she decided that, quote, her mom needs to learn a lesson. And so in that case, it means she is stripping her mom of the mothering responsibilities that the mother perceives to have, such as cooking and having the child eat what is on the dining table. Julie refuses to say that. She refuses to acknowledge her mom's presence in the home. She refuses to talk to her. She refuses to basically engage with her mom in any kind of way, even though they live in the same apartment that summer. This is exactly the same pattern. Julie in 2013 was preparing for college. In 2019, she was preparing for a master's program in Columbia. She has not changed, let's just say that. On the other hand, Jiaqi, the underachiever who I talked about a little bit, had a completely different thing that was going on. In 2014, Jiaqi was trying to go to college. He said that, well, I met him in school and I asked him immediately why he never responded to my calls or my texts. And he said that, oh, it's because my mom took my phone. His mother confiscated his phone because his test scores were not high enough. They were not dwindling. It was just not high. And so her mom took his phone and instead gave him a phone that was exact same age as he was. That phone was black and white. It had the very basic functions, but basically it was paper text, kind of like that. So he was so ashamed with that phone that he never used it in public. And so of course he couldn't really do anything. In 2019, Jiaqi had a problem. Jiaqi was, he didn't really do a good job in the national entrance exam. He couldn't really go to a good university that his mom thinks, or his parents thinks was worth going. And so this is all the words that they were using, worth going. And so they decided to ship him off to France. In France, however, Jiaqi started to learn French. He was having trouble keeping up, and he never really understood the importance of, doing something academically, or how to study, something like that. He was still the underachiever Jiaqi when he just arrived in France. A year later, he was expelled. He received an expulsion notice telling him to pack up and go because his grades or his test scores were never up to standard for that French university. Out of frenzy, he called his mom and asked, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do? Can you help me? Talk to the counselor or talk to a professor or something." What did his mom do? His mom hung up on him and told him that this was his problem. She really can't do anything. She's done everything she could to raise him, to send him to France, plan a backup for him, but so this is on his own. In 2014, Jiaqi's mom did something because he was preparing for college, and so basically his mom was confiscating his phone instead of helping him do something else. Instead of aggressively helping, she was more passively helping. In 2019, the passivity even turned into hanging up on him and leaving the expulsion basically as his own personal responsibility. In 2019, Jiaqi told me that actually in 2020, Jiaqi remained in school. He talked and begged his way back to with the Chinese counselor. The university decided to give him another chance. I don't really know how he did that. I suspect that it was because he was elite. He knew how to address the issue, or maybe he just learned something beforehand. But luckily for him, he was given a second chance. And so Yu says that the phenomenon is widespread in China. Sorry, I just saw this. I'm not entirely sure which phenomenon, but I'm really glad that you said it was widespread, because this means that even though I'm looking at elite students in China, it holds for even, oh yeah, parents taking the phone. Thanks. So yeah, I'm really glad that this finding has more in common than I would otherwise suspect. Great, thank you. All right, so the third thing that they have to learn is to make backup plans. Literature shows that 50% of the elite children become elite. If you really think about it, it's like flipping a coin. 50% of your chances is very high, but it's also not that high. Nothing is certain. So this means that lightning strikes, contingencies strike too. As elites, they need to prepare for bumps on the road. And so this is something that they learn. They really do learn. Sometimes these backup plans are made by parents. Other times these backup plans are made by themselves. But Shi is one of the study gods whose parents really helped her make a backup plan. In 2013, Shi failed a test. It was a very important test that would directly give her extra points for the national entrance exam. However, as the top performer of the star high school, she still failed it. Nobody knew what happened. She also didn't know what happened. But at that very day, I was staying with the family. I saw her mom coach her for the first time. When we were waiting for the exam outcomes, her mom was even telling me, "Oh, I ever talked to Shi Ying about anything? I know I could, I just don't. I really shouldn't do that. Something like that. 3 hours later, when her daughter fails a test, her mom starts coaching her by asking directly, what is that test? What is the question? What did you answer? What you should have answered was da, da, da. So that was a very direct way of coaching. That seemed to have helped. Xing later on went to Beijing University, one of the top 2 universities in China. In 2017, Xing graduated Beijing University, and her mom suggested that she should do an internship first before taking on the offers that she received from Cambridge, Oxford, as well as Columbia and Stanford. It was an odd choice, I'm not sure why, but her mom suggested that, and so she did that. It turned out that the mother was super, super insightful, because in 2018 and 19, in 2018 actually, the following year, she reapplied to the exact same schools. She was readmitted to all of them, except that as a master's student, she got full funding. This was virtually not heard of because her major was something like environmental protection. It was more of like a humanities, social science majors that barely gives any funding or stipend to students who are only applying for master's programs. She got full funding. And later on, I found out that only 8 of the students in the entire UK received that kind of funding. So she was one of 8 in the world, or in the entire UK, who got readmitted with full funding. And so this turned out that it was really interesting, because in 2017, when she did everything she wanted to do, she did not have the full funding. And her mom suggested that she should do an internship instead. In 2018, she reapplies, gets the same exact outcome, but better. And so this is the mom preparing a backup, or making sure with insights that there is no bumps in the road. The road is paved. It is made straight. It is basically not a little road. It's like a highway that the daughter can simply just fly on. On the other hand, there's also another case with, for example, Jimming, who was a loser. He also never agreed that he was a loser. Wait, hold on. Is there something else? No. Okay. So Jimming in 2014 submitted a college list that was problematic, to say the least. He overestimated his test scores, his exam scores. He applied to all the universities that were so-called above his league. So he ended up not going to any university in China. He applied for Hong Kong universities that would take in the exams from Beijing, exam scores from Beijing. They didn't really turn into anything. So he also didn't get into any university in Hong Kong. Then he scrambled to apply for other universities outside of mainland China and Hong Kong, but would take in his very low test scores, and so he would have a college. He ended up going to a college that he has never thought about, that is not among the top world ranked, and that also had a effect on his peer relationships. 1 month into college, really just 1 month, he has lost touch with basically all of his high school friends, who he was really close with. Not that close with because he was a loser, but he still, they could chat, they went out, they did talk. It's just that a month later, he lost contact with all of them. When I asked the mom said she didn't really do anything. She never looked at Jimming's college list. She did not imagine that there would be a need for backup plans. She did not imagine that contingencies would strike. She didn't even realize that she should have done something. She then later on said that in hindsight, she could have done some things. For example, she could have looked over Jimming's college list. She could have helped apply for Hong Kong universities over there, but she didn't. She was a college graduate. She's been through the process. She knew what to do. She just didn't do anything. And so Without a backup plan, Jimming didn't do very well in the transition to college. After his graduation, however, his mom apparently learned from the lesson and started to make a backup plan. So basically, the mom secured a position in Beijing in a government corporation, but still the mom stayed on the sideline. Jimming didn't want to go back to Beijing. He felt ashamed. Basically, he said that his parents had to explain to everyone around their neighborhood why their son went to a top high school but failed to get into any university in mainland China. But then, so I think that's why he didn't want to go back, but also he was insistent on going somewhere else. He wanted to become a global participant. He wanted to still have a stab at that global elite status. And so what did he do? Instead of taking on the position that his mom offered, which is actually a pretty good, stable, white-collar, middle-class job, he decided to travel to Tokyo alone. There are rounds of employment or job, I think it was job hunts in Japan. I think there is one or two every year. He failed in getting any interviews or any positions for about a year and a half. He was unemployed there. He was working on side jobs to support himself. And note that Tokyo is a very expensive place. Taking on side jobs, also living in crowded, cramped, communal living situations, that was not elite, to say the least. I would think it would be better to go for a position that his mom secured and be happily middle class. Okay, middle class is good. I like middle class. But not Jimming, not any of these elite students. He wanted to be part of the global elite. So he stuck himself in Tokyo. He took on jobs. He did whatever he could. And finally, after a year and a half of unemployment or side employment, he found a job that would put him in at least upper middle class. It was a stable job. It was a full-time position. And the fact that he was in Tokyo and an upper middle class job in Tokyo suggested that he could still claim elite status back in China, and he claimed to have a leg in the global elite group. And so these are the three things that they need to work on and they need to learn about. All right. And so what this study is really talking about is that there is the new elites from China who are participating in the global competition. They are a group of globally oriented kids. They go to school, they work, or they do exchange programs everywhere around the world, not just in China, not just in the US, some are in Europe, other times they're in other parts of East Asia. They have various trajectories. They sometimes go in finance, such as Tracy or Ashley. Some of them are doing research. For example, Xing is going to NGO. She's imagining herself, well, actually she plans on going to Switzerland. Again, why Switzerland? Switzerland for NGO, one of the top 3 NGO programs in the world. A few of them are in media. Some of them are also in technological fields, such as Alex himself. They do a lot of things. They have various trajectories. The highly successful are doing very well. Again, they are top 10% income in the US by age 23. If starting income or starting salary is an important predictor of future salary, then we would probably expect them to be even higher achieving or even higher earnings down the road. In fact, there are signs already by 2020, some of them are married. Those who are married, who I know of, are already top 1% household income by US standards. So this is a group of very wealthy socioeconomic elites. They are doing very well in terms of socioeconomic measures. Even the less successful are doing quite well. The least successful is Jimming. He is upper middle class in Tokyo. Another not as successful kid is Jiaqi. Jiaqi, however, it was doing an internship at Lamborghini. He expects that internship will turn into an actual offer as a full-time vehicle or some kind of mobile engineer at this company. When I asked him about Lamborghini and if Lamborghini was similar to Toyota, he basically sneered at me and highlighted the prestige of working at Lamborghini, where the best sports cars or the race cars are produced, and so the engines are very different. I am illiterate in that sense, so I will take his word for it as a future engineer. But so you can see that even the less successful are doing very well. They're going on high prestige in the field of vehicle engineering, or they are middle range income, but high income compared to China at least. And so in this entire thing, how is this related to, comparative education? How is this related to education at all? Is that the schooling process, at least in starting at least as late as in 12th grade, is already a key process that leads directly to status formation. Students can directly connect their status in school to future status and how they should fight for future status in society. They are connecting the adolescent society that they are forming directly to the adult society, not just in China, but around the world. And this is taking place when we say that there is increasing educational stratification. There is increased inequality around the world, and China especially now has one of the widest socioeconomic gaps in the world. This means that there is a lot of privileges that elite can enjoy and that are unattainable by others. At the same time, there's increased importance of educational credentials. Why are they fighting for the top universities and top graduate schools? Because educational credentials is more and more important these days. And when they can get them, they will use them. And importantly, they are prepared to get these educational credentials through elite privileges, by resources, the best teachers, their parents pampering, their school districts, and whatever resource they have. But at the same time, they're not acknowledging these things. Instead, they are privileged enough to focus on the other skill sets that will prepare them for global competition. So when they are talking about what they enjoy, they never mention the resources, they never mention the advantages they have. Instead, they focus on what they do. They learned important skills. They learned about the status hierarchy. They learned to behave accordingly in alignment with their status. They learned the importance of backup plans. It seems as if it is all something that they earned through individual hard work, while actually a lot of them comes through privileges that are not made possible to the non-elite. And so this study also importantly calls for a new perspective that explains the rise of the global elites in the world. So when we talk about the elites, oftentimes we think about, elites, a small group of people. They are probably very powerful, very influential within a country. They are very wealthy by each local standards. Usually we would say elites are everywhere within their own country. They're influential and they are in collaboration or competition with other people who are fighting for other elite status in the same location. However, this study shows that elites are no longer confounded or binded within a locality or within national borders. They are coming global. They are wealthy not at a local standards. They are wealthy at international standards. Think about Jimming. He's not thinking about being well off in China. He wants to be well off by world standards, and so he's willing to put up with a lot in Tokyo. They are also an interconnected group. they are moving across national boundaries. It is very likely for them and other elites to be born in one country, go to school in another, work at a third, and then later on, perhaps they will retire at a fourth. So this is the elites that are moving across national borders. Visa problems seem to be non-issues, which is very interesting. I don't know why they think that way, but so far it does seem that they're really not much affected by the tightening visa quotas, at least in the US. They also, because they're interconnected and wealthy at international standards, they share very similar school and work experiences. I don't have any evidence of whether elites in other countries learn the same set of skills or a set of intuitions or entitlements in school, but I'm willing to bet that they will be very similar in other countries as well. After all, if they are competing in the same global arena, they must have similar currencies and they will have to share so-called the same languages. And so that is something that we can possibly think about. And finally, there are new elites from China. Who are they? Again, back to our question, who are they? Why did they become like that? And how did they become like that? Elites in China really doesn't speak about elites in China. It speaks about elites in global society. It's just that they happen to come from China. They know the system, they strategize behaviors accordingly, and they are always plans for lightning that strikes. Earlier in this talk, I suggested that they seem to be a group who are doing very well at the game of life. But actually, when you really think about it, they're not just doing very well at the game of life. They are a group of students, or now young adults, previously youth, who are going from one place to another. They are going towards the world, and they are gradually establishing themselves in the global society. And so this research is one of them that I'm trying to connect sociology of education, comparative education, with the new general studies of elites or globalization altogether, using the example of the new generation of elites from China, combined with the importance of China as a rising global power, to look at the formation of a new group of global elites, at least importantly in the schooling process. And so that is the end of my talk. I think there's another third question. Great, thank you, Catherine. I have referenced Seamus Collins' book, Privilege, the New Elite Within the United States Boarding School System. I highly recommend that book. That book, honestly, is the book that inspired me to start this project. If I may, I'll start Q&A anyway with this. I started this project because I was reading the book and I thought, this is a great book. I love it. It's really enjoyable. It's super interesting, but why does it not resonate with anything I've seen when I was growing up in Taiwan? And so then I decided to look at how the elite youth or elite adolescents were becoming elites in China at a complete different educational system. And today's talk is basically what I have found through ethnography, intense ethnography in about 2 years, 2012 to 2014, as well as follow-up visits over the next 6 to 7 years up to end of 2019. Thank you. I'll give the floor back to Ran.
Thank you so much. Wow, this is really interesting and very insightful. And we do have students from China in this class who might be more familiar with the phenomenon you talked about. But no matter what, I do think it's really great study and highly relevant to our weekly topic. This week, we're going to talk about inequality. So this gives us a closer look at how elites reproduce their privileges, right? So it's really important. Thank you so much. Do we have any more question here? You can either type into the chat box. We might be able to accept one or two more, one more probably. Any more question, or you can speak. You can unmute yourself and speak. Anyone?
Did I talk for too long?
No. You talked about the whole book, right? It's a long book, and there's a lot of information.
Sorry, I sort of forgot about the time.
No, thank you so much. So this class ends at 10:45. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
This
I'm
talk.
really glad to share. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I promise I'll get back to you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great. So students, if you have any question, can send email. Yeah,
Great,
so
thanks.
yeah, I won't keep students here. They still have your talk was basically my childhood. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So again, this book will probably come out next August, right? That's the plan.
That's the plan, hopefully.
So make sure you all buy it next summer. It would be a great book. So yeah, this is the end of this class. Thank you again, Yi-lin, for coming over. Thank you, and students, have a good day.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah, bye. As usual, I will stay in the room for a few more minutes in case there's any question, but thank you again. Bye.